Gail Stern is a sexual assault prevention educator. She's co-founder of Catharsis Productions, and some of the group's classes take place on college campuses. Gail, it's good to have you with us. So many things stand out here to me, and I would imagine to a lot of people, but one of the things we just spoke about with Dan is that one of the women actually said to police after this was in local headlines that she felt, quote, empowered to come forward because she heard this account of someone else. Is the message changing to victims of sexual assault that it is perhaps okay in a way that it may not have felt that it was before to come forward?
I think there's been a lot of wonderful student activism on this, and I've been in the field for 25 years, and I've never seen so much positive advocacy on behalf of students. But I think that one woman's story is very much like so many others, which is you're afraid of coming forward. Maybe they blame themselves, maybe they haven't identified what happened to them as rape, maybe they're labeling it a bad hookup. And hearing that someone else was brave enough to come forward and call it the crime that it is can be not just empowering for survivors in that immediate area, but for everyone watching. And whether they're male, female, trans, it doesn't matter. Seeing a survivor come forward is a major thing.
This has become a major topic of discussion, and I want to say we're not comparing apples to apples here, but sexual assault and inappropriate behavior is in the headlines and has been for the last few weeks in a way that I don't think we've seen in some time. That too, the fact that it's now a discussion that people are having on a regular basis, is that changing the perspective as well from the other side? In that, yes, it is okay to talk about this, not just if you're a survivor, but if you're a person who believes it's wrong.
It's certainly been happening at a lot more dinner conversations than it used to. I think what people are resisting, though, is the idea that behavior that they'd first thought was acceptable or normal is now being criminalized. I think there was a recent conversation where a certain leader got very angry at a news anchor who wanted to talk about the sexual predatory behavior of one of the current candidates. And the individual got very angry and said, "Don't use that word. You can't use that word." And the fact is, the behavior described does fit that word. And there are a lot of people who are, in fact, really challenged by that and having to reflect back on their past behavior and feel either guilty or defensive about actions that they thought were totally acceptable, kissing people whether or not they checked in. And I see that kind of defensiveness too, as if now, and the phrase political correctness is often used.
Right.
I think
there's also
what's important
Well, I was just going to say, because this is what you talk about, and I want you to just fill in our viewers at home. There also seems to be a disconnect in terms of what is and is not consent. So in reading through the police document, this woman's account, she says at one point that she, quote, accepted my fate and gave up a little bit. I realized he was bigger and stronger. I thought maybe I could just wait this out and then get away. And goes on to say, eventually, I stopped fighting and he took it as permission. This is what you do in your line of work. You remind people what is permission, what is not permission, that not saying, you know, that saying no matters, that you have to say yes. Do we all get that? I mean, where is the disconnect in terms of the education?
I think the disconnect starts before we ever talk about rape. The fact is, most people don't get a comprehensive sex ed program prior to entering college or the military or the workforce. They get pregnancy prevention and disease prevention. They don't get the conversation about why it's important that it's mutual. The word consent has come to seem like the do not pass go, do not accept $200 thing, the compliance. You have to get this before you get what you want. And consent is actually an ethical principle. It's your job, if you're initiating something, to make sure the other person wants it like you do. It's kind of a low ethical bar if you think about it.
Sounds so simple, and yet...
In terms of sexual, right, but in sexual culture, right. I mean, in sexual culture, the idea of entitlement, the idea that pushing and pushing until the person says stop, because that's what the social market will bear, that's so prevalent that without comprehensive education, you're not going to unpack that. And on college campuses, typically they'll approach this as a compliance issue. We're going to get out that one program, it's going to hit everybody during freshman orientation, and then we're done. And that's such a check-a-box solution to, I think, a much more comprehensive long-term problem. And I'm hoping that universities and colleges start taking a lead from the military, actually, and doing a more top-down approach where all levels of university leadership really take the lead on understanding this issue and resolve to change their campuses for the better.
It is terrible that stories like this put it back into the headlines and give us a reason to talk about it, but it is perhaps a reminder that we need to talk about it more often. Gail Stern, appreciate you being with us. Thanks for your insight today.